What's going on, everybody? This is the Defenders of Comics, and I cannot tell you how excited we are. We have Aaron Lopresti in the house with us, and we are going to bombard you with a lot of questions. But first, we want to just say hello and introduce yourself to the chat.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. I'm really excited to be here, and I will give you plenty of answers. I can handle any question you can throw at me.
All right. That's a challenge.
Yeah, well, one thing I can do besides draw is talk. So I'm well prepared.
That's good. You're in a good spot then.
Yes, viewers, we just had a question. If viewers can ask questions anytime, and we'll put them up, and I'm sure Aaron would be glad to answer those.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to throw this over to Ace.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I got the designated point man, so.
Ace, will you stand up so we can see your shirt?
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Oh, baby. See?
Yep.
Well, what is that from? I love Doc Savage. I'm a huge Doc Savage fan.
I think it's an Alex Ross, and I got it off the internet. Yeah.
I've never seen that one. I have to check that out. That's pretty cool.
I'm still waiting for that really great Doc Savage movie, but maybe someday.
Maybe someday.
Yeah, maybe someday. Yeah.
I waited forever for John.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my gosh. We could really get into some deep stuff here. I waited forever for that movie, too. So
I actually liked it. I wish it had done better because I would have loved to have seen the sequel when he went back. I wasn't thrilled with what's his face, the lead, but other than that, I thought everything was great. So
yeah, I was super excited about that movie, and I even got my wife to read the book, so that was pretty cool.
Hey, there you go.
Yeah,
my wife's actually read
really,
some Doc Savage books. She ran out of books to read one time, and she started going through my Doc Savage collection, and I kept saying, okay, you can read them, but don't bend the covers back. Ruin the covers.
Wear gloves. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're not in that nice a shape, but I didn't want her bending it like that and just breaking the spine on all those books. It took me years to get I got all the James Bama covers, and it was like, it took me years to get all of them. So
awesome.
I didn't want to wreck them, but she's read a few.
Yeah, perfect.
Hey, this is an ongoing joke real quick, Aaron, just so you know, but I got to show this.
Oh, we can always count on Mr. Kane.
There we go. That's funny. That was good, Greg. All right.
So yeah, Aaron, we're just super excited to have you with us, and we are overjoyed to also talk about your new project, and just thought maybe you'd want to share what you're working on, your new crowdfunded book, and I know you've got a trade that's coming out too that's pretty exciting. So maybe we can talk about some of that.
Okay, well, let me let's do the first pitch. I guess I'll the Garbage Man. There you go. The Garbage Man trade paperback. This is all the material I did for DC about 10 years ago. I did 2 separate miniseries, and they were about 120 pages total of story material. And I got the rights back to it finally a few years ago. And so I worked out a deal with Dark Horse, and the original storyline had Batman appearing in it. He wasn't in it a ton, but he was kind of integral in it. So that was about 18 pages of material that had to be removed and redrawn. So, and rewritten and characters changed to replace Batman. So the interesting thing about this trade is it's the first time the material has been put in a trade paperback, but it also includes 18 pages of new material that I had to draw to replace Batman, which also includes the first appearance of a super team from my Lopresti verse, for lack of a better term at this point. So you're not just buying a trade paperback, you're actually getting some new material and the first appearance of some characters that hopefully I'll be using again in the not too distant future. So that's available on Amazon and through your local comic shop for pre-order. I'm also going to have some when my Wraith of God campaign goes live, which we'll talk about next, I guess. And so that'll be one of the tiers where you can get some of the trades from Garbage Man signed. So I guess it depends on how quickly you want to well, it's not going to be out till November, so I guess it depends on how quickly you want to order. My Wraith of God campaign should go live in about 2 weeks, and so if you want to wait before you order the Garbage Man trade paperback, you can certainly do that and order it from me during the campaign.
And just so everybody knows real quick in chat, both of those links for the Amazon of Garbage Man is in the description. And then also your Indiegogo for Wraith of God is in the description. So you can click on that and sign up if you need to.
Excellent.
So I got a question about Garbage Man, and this may be a legal question that you can't really answer, but there was a couple other properties around that time, like Bloodhound and Monolith from DC, and then Garbage Man. And I've noticed that they've got the creators have the rights back. How do you guys get something back that you created under DC's umbrella? Like, how does that work? Or is that just,
well, it was a special deal. When I came over from Marvel after doing Ms. Marvel, Planet Hulk and Ms. Marvel, one of the reasons I went over is because I wanted to do some more writing. I used to write when I first started. I wrote when I was working on What the way back in the early 90s for Marvel, their humor book. I wrote and penciled and inked all my stories in there, and I wrote some Xena stuff for Topps, which I also drew. And then, of course, I wrote some of the issues of Sludge when I was working at Malibu. And thank you, Cosmic Comic History. Appreciate that. And so I wanted to get back to not necessarily full-time writing, but to do some projects that I could write and draw. And I told this to Dan DiDio, and he was like, yeah, I don't care. That's fine. And he said, in fact, he's looking for a monster book. And because Swamp Thing was being held by Vertigo at the time, and he couldn't get Swamp Thing back from Vertigo because he wanted to use Swamp Thing in the regular DCU. So that was Garbage Man was supposed to be the Swamp Thing replacement in the DCU. But it was specifically set up so that it was a creator-owned book. And what DC did was they would license it from me. So they gave me a flat fee of, at the time, I think it was $2,500, and that was the licensing fee. But it was a licensing fee forever. Okay. So even though I was still owned the book, DC, or owned the character, DC owned the licensing rights to the character. So I couldn't do anything except collect money if they ever did anything with it. And the only stipulation in the contract was that that they had to use it once every 3 years or once every 5 years. I can't remember. It was one of the two things. Okay. And so like they could have said, I think it was 3. But anyway, I think they could have said, okay, Aaron, we want to do a Garbage Man Halloween special because we want to maintain the rights to this character. And then I would have had the right to say, okay, yes, I'll write and draw that. And if I said, no, I don't want to do that, they would have said, okay, we'll get someone else to do it. So basically I had right of first refusal, but I didn't have the right to stop any project. I just had the right to be asked to work on it first. But they never did that, right? They got Swamp Thing back from Vertigo. And so Swamp Thing was, Dan made a big deal out of Swamp Thing once he got him back in the DCU. So Garbage Man became obsolete almost immediately. And so they never did anything with it. And they had these same deals with Kevin Maguire. He did a book called Tanga. You guys may remember, it was in the same anthology.
I do. Yeah, I do.
And he has the rights back to that. And I think he's releasing it digitally. I don't know why he hasn't put a deal together to get it traded in a paperback, but because he would easily could do it very easily. But so he had the same deal. And I'm guessing Monolith was is that
Palmiotti or?
Yeah, it was Palmiotti. Thank you. And so I would assume he had the same deal. And I was surprised because I was talking to Kevin about this because Kevin was very adamant about getting the rights back to the character. I was kind of like, well, what am I going to do with him anyway, right? So I wasn't as adamant about it, but I would have liked to have seen DC use him again. But I told him, I said, all they have to do is say, we're going to do a Tanga one shot every 3 years or a Garbage Man one shot. I said, and they can keep the IP, why would they just give it back to us when they don't have to? But that's exactly what they did. So we took it and that
is shocking that they would just do that. Cause any IP is something they could potentially exploit. So that's pretty
Right.
neat
That's
that
what I
you
was
got to.
thinking.
Yeah.
And the cost of producing just, one comic every 3 years to keep it alive was,
Yeah.
why
Oh,
not?
yeah.
But they
Yeah.
didn't. So,
Well, their loss is your gain. So we're excited
right.
to see more of it. And I'm really excited to hear. I didn't know that about, having to replace Batman with your own creation and then adding more of your own universe character. So that's exciting. Any
Yeah.
teasers about what they might be?
Well, yeah, I had way back in the 90s when I was in a studio here in Portland called Studiosaurus with Terry and Rachel Dodson and Matt Haley and Carl Kiesel and Ron Randall and Randy Emberlin and Gary Martin and who am I forgetting? Matthew Clark. And I was constantly pushing everybody to, let's do our own Image thing. We got all these guys here. Let's make our own books, and so I was constantly coming up with concepts, and I had a kind of a creepy super team, and the book was originally called Creeps, but before I could get it out or do anything with it, Dan Mishkin and why do I keep forgetting the artist? But it does. Anyway, they came out with a book called Creeps. It wasn't the same thing. It was like circus freaks type thing, and but they actually published it, I believe, through Image. And so I said, well, I guess now I have to change the name. And I couldn't come up with a name. And eventually I did. And so they are now officially the Night Club. And so
Nice.
So I'm using the same initial 3 characters that are in that team, but of course they're built to expand. So we have the initial 3 members, but they're always looking for, weird mutant characters or something like that to kind of join their group. So they can expand, but the initial 3 characters will be featured in the Garbage Man. And it worked out really well because, the story originally took place in Gotham City, so I had to change the city, but these characters are very, and how they operate, especially the leader of the group, is very Batman-like in the sense that, they operate in a very dark city and, there's a lot of weird stuff going on. So they fit right in. When I took Batman out, it was so easy just to put, I didn't have to, it wasn't like trying to fit Captain America into, a Batman story. These guys, they fit really well. So
yeah.
This makes me want to read it even more. I mean,
oh yeah.
Is he there?
Uh-oh. Do we get some? We lose something?
It's all good. We do have some questions, so when he does come back,
are we back? Okay.
Oh, there he goes.
There we are.
Oh, we're good. Can you can hear everything fine now?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Ace, are you going to ask one question that I knew you were trying to set up that we talked about before about the Garbage Man influence?
Yeah. We're going to pull something out from way back, and I'm kind of a big fan of this universe, the Ultraverse. It looks like you worked on Sludge.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, so there seems to be a theme. Do you kind of have an affinity for kind of the muck monster, or is it just a happy coincidence?
There's no coincidence. No, I mean, even growing up, my two of my favorite books, they were close to my favorite. Was Swamp Thing, when Wrightson was working on it, was my favorite book. And I was a big Man Thing fan as well. And so when the Ultraverse was doing Sludge, and I got an opportunity to basically they kind of laid out all the line and said, what do you want to work on, right? And they wanted me to launch, basically they wanted me on Hardcase, and money-wise, that would have been a smarter move for me because it was one of the first books that launched, so they sold better. But when I saw Sludge, I was like, no, that's what I got to work on, right?
Right.
And so Sludge didn't premiere until October, and at that point, it still sold pretty well, but the sales figures were on their way down. The boom was ending, and so I didn't quite do well on the royalties like I would have if I'd done Hardcase. But Hardcase just was zero interest to me, and so I wrote when when I got together with Steve Gerber and first met and we talked about what we were going to do, it became very, very obvious that we had two different visions for Sludge. I wanted to do a monster book, right? It was just kind of a monster of the month book, right? Who does he fight this month? Well, Frankenstein or whatever. And Steve wanted to do a crime book, right? And sort of use Sludge as a catalyst for stories about this crime organization that was going on, which really didn't interest me at all, right? So we were kind of fighting all the time, not fighting, but discussing different avenues for the character. And Steve never, without the, I think he got the first two scripts in on time, and then that was it. And so then I had to jump in and start writing. And so if you'll take a look at the books that I wrote, the first issue, well, the third issue, I suggested bringing in Lord Pumpkin because I wanted to draw the character.
Yeah.
So, and then on issue 4 was the Alligator Man story, which I wrote, and then and Gerber dialogued. And then this issue 5, the Frankenstein issue, I wrote and dialogued. And then I think Steve came back with a script for 6, 7, and 8, but I co-plotted those. And then he got behind again. And so then I came out with another issue. And so if you look at the issues I did, they're all like Sludge, you know, fighting monsters. And you look at the issues Steve did, they're always got this really this sort of crime element in them, you know. So, but anyway, yeah, Garbage Man would be, if I was doing Sludge, if I had the rights to Sludge, this is how I would do him. Now their origins are, I mean, okay, let's face it, swamp creatures or muck monsters, the origins are all pretty much the same, right? Somebody does something, pisses somebody off, they experiment on them, they get blown up or whatever, and they mutate or combine with whatever happens to be around to form this new monster, right? And, you know, a Swamp Thing, it was a plant growth formula. With Man Thing, it was a super soldier formula that, that was kind of the shtick I used with Garbage Man. But the character who actually gets changed, he's not a scientist, he's a lawyer who came, and not even a particularly honest one, who kind of falls into some information that he's not supposed to be privy to. And so instead of, you know, making him a deal or whatever, they kill him, or they think they are. And of course they're wrong. And so he has kind of a different set of motivations, but you know, the whole thing is chemical induced explosion, guys, you know, in the waste dump becomes Garbage Man. So it was, go ahead. I was just going to say it was designed to be a classic monster superhero book like Swamp Thing or Man Thing. Sure. So I didn't try and reinvent the wheel. I tried to create something familiar that I could kind of do my own take on.
We have a couple of viewer questions, and they're going to segue sort of where we're headed anyway. This is from Greg. So he's just getting into comics, wondering, would these books be good for someone like him?
Well, if he likes monster stories, definitely. I mean, the thing about, like, with Garbage Man particularly is, especially with the trade, with the Batman being removed, it's all new material. So you don't read it and go, well, wait a minute, where did this guy start? And, you know, that was 20 years ago in Adventure Comics number 14 with blah, blah, blah. You know, it's brand new material. So if you're a new comic book reader and you're looking not to get necessarily sucked into, you know, 70 years of comic book history and continuity, this is a great book for you because it's all sort of self-contained. The story, you know, it ends on a springboard to do more stuff, but the story itself wraps up, and it's introducing more characters, which would only entice you to buy more of my stuff. So I would then encourage you, of course, to.
Well, and that's what I'm finding out personally. I can sort of relate to Greg. I mean, I always was into comics, but I was in specific characters. I'm finding myself really liking the crowdfunded kind because of what you're saying. It's new characters all the way, and you can get introduced right away instead of trying to get all the history from back when of Superman or Spider-Man or somebody.
All 80 years of Batman and Superman and everyone else.
Can't do it.
Right. No, I think that's an advantage to crowdfunding, right? Because we're all bringing out new characters, and you're getting in right on the start of it, provided everybody continues to produce on a regular basis. And through time, we'll find out who those people are and who they aren't, and then you as buyers and readers will have to make the decision on, well, I'm going to support this guy because I know I'm going to get content on a regular basis, and he's not going to leave me hanging on this story and never pay it off, right? Yeah. So. But I like the format, as we were talking a little bit off air, of doing maybe a larger format book like I'm going to be doing with Wraith of God, which is 72 to 80 pages long. So you're getting essentially an entire miniseries in there. So it's not the end of the character, but it's the end of that storyline, right? So you're getting the entire storyline in one book. And so there's not necessarily a cliffhanger at the end where you're going, oh my gosh, I got to wait 8 months till Aaron produces another, crowdfunded book to find out what happens. It's all there. You just have to wait that 6 to 8 months for the next adventure to start. But so that's, that I think is an advantage too.
This is from Sam.
No decompress stories here. Then that's good. Right. You're not writing for the trade because you already got it.
Right. This is packed.
This question is from Sam, and by the way, he might be your biggest fan now that he's heard you are passionate about horror comics. So he wants to know, Garbage Man and Wrath of God sound like horror comics. What was your inspiration for the characters?
Well, I just discussed Garbage Man, so that the inspiration was, if you want to go back to earliest stuff, would have been Wrights and Swamp Thing. For Wraith of God is a little bit more interesting. I was about the same time that I came up with the nightclub characters that are going to appear in Garbage Man. I was pitching, or I put together a pitch to Marvel to redo their Western Ghost Rider. And you can imagine back in, it was 97, 98, I was still sort of a newish talent in the industry. So I wasn't someone that really had any sort of, leverage or rep that someone would go, hey, let's let this guy write and draw a Western Ghost Rider. I'm sure he'll turn it into a sales bonanza. So I didn't really get anybody to even look at it, right? But I really thought it was a strong story. So rather than just letting it die, I said, well, you know what? I can revamp this a little bit, turn it into my own character, and do it myself. And that's what I did. So it wasn't necessarily. I mean, I'm a fan of Westerns, not like, say, Graham Nolan or someone who just is Westerns. But I felt like whenever I would go and approach a company, whether it was DC or Marvel, on my own project, I never went to them and said, hey, I got this great idea for a Spider-Man miniseries or, whatever, because I figured those would be the hardest things to get approved, right? You got to jump through too many hoops. There's too many continuity issues. So I'd always look at the oddball characters that these companies had, and then I would go, like, I did Metamorpho, for example, that probably are not going to sell real well, but on the flip side of that, no one's going to be messing with you. Oh, look, he's got it. No one's going to be messing with you, right? So you can go in there and do pretty much whatever you want to within limits. And so I would always pick characters that they weren't doing anything with and would have the least amount of resistance editorially to what I wanted to do. So, the Ghost Rider, I was always liked it when I was a kid, the Western Ghost Rider. And I've always been a horror fan. And now let me clarify what I mean by horror. I'm not like, Clive Barker kind of horror fan. I'm like a Universal Monsters horror fan, or that type of stuff, more classic horror films. I think a lot of people confuse gross outs with horror, and I prefer, I guess, monster movies and monster themed stuff because it affords you more creativity when you're drawing and creating something. And they also tend to be a little bit, you can be a little more illustrative and a little more detail oriented with a book that has a lot of atmosphere as opposed to just, superheroes flying through the noonday sky of Manhattan. Right. So those are my inspirations for creating monster books. I like monsters, but I'm not necessarily a huge horror fan in the broadest scope of what that may entail. But I'm a big monster fan, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, and so, Well, and even to expand on that, Aaron, like, yeah, Metamorpho. I mean, you don't minimize his importance. I think he's a great character. I think he's amazing, and he fits kind of the shtick of of a Swamp Thing type
Yeah,
thing, you know.
another
Uh,
monster-like character.
yeah, in
Yeah, he
monster
is.
like,
Yeah,
you know, got
sympathetic monster.
involved in the wrong situation and it was pushed into this elemental character that he is. But you know, I think he's a strong character, and I think Ace and I have always talked about how great it is to see these type of miniseries to to really excite people for these small characters. And again, and you're going back to characters that trickle down from that type of character. So
Yeah, absolutely. And the unfortunate thing with Metamorpho was one of the things that always bugged me about the characters, the origin did not make any sense, or it was not well thought out and developed, right? And
Agreed.
so I wanted to go in there and make sense of it, right? So I could use the same elements, the pyramid and the orb and all that kind of stuff, but have it make sense, because it was like the orb gives Metamorpho his power, but it also makes him helpless before it. You know, you're like, well, how in the heck does that work? How does he get his power from this thing? But then it keeps him from using his powers when he's around it. It made no sense, right? And why is it in the middle of in a pyramid and out in Egypt? And so I worked out what I thought was. Yeah, exactly. We got to come up with a new character in 6 minutes. What have you got? And
Right.
so but I took those elements because I didn't want to just kind of crap on everything that had been done before. I wanted to just sort of use what had done before, but then have it, develop it so it made sense. And that's what I did with Metamorpho. And I was actually pretty proud of how it came out. And then they put Metamorpho in the Terrifics or whatever that series was, and they just,
Yeah.
everything I did went right out the window. And I was
we really enjoyed that trade. It was a good reinterpretation for Metamorpho, and I think it would have really been a good springboard for him. But you're right. Yeah, then he went to the Terrifics. It's like, okay, he's just the Thing, I guess. So whatever.
Yeah, especially what I did with his girlfriend. What's her face? Why can't I think of it? Help me out, you guys.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Stag.
Stag. Yeah.
Simon is her dad. What's her name? I can't believe I forgot it.
I can't remember either. I wrote it. How embarrassing was that? Sapphire. Is it Sapphire Stag? Is it Sapphire?
Sapphire. Isn't that right?
Sapphire. Yeah, that's it. That's
Sapphire
Let's
Stag.
just go with that.
I had to Google it.
Okay.
That's it.
So yeah, so I turned her into this new sort of like cosmic powered being that could have been a real cool character to use going forward. And they just we're not using that. And I'm like,
yeah.
I guess it's this Elseworld story now. I have no idea.
Okay, before I get to this next viewer question, I know Ref wants to talk about this gigantically, and it would mean a lot to him if you would talk about this particular project that you worked on.
Ref's trying to show his tattoo.
Now, Aaron,
yes.
When we're talking about characters that I have just followed throughout my life, or throughout my enjoyment in comics, Booster Gold is there. This is gonna branch out, and I'm gonna give you a pretty leading question. Who is your favorite character to draw? And if it isn't Booster Gold, who would it be?
And if it's not Booster Gold, would it be Booster Gold?
Good way. I'm a huge fan of Dan Jurgens too, so I'm glad you got to work with someone like that.
Well, so am I, because Dan knows how to write, kind of a fun, old-fashioned comic, and this really had sort of a Silver Age feel to it, even with the villains that we created and introduced, and that was sort of our intent the whole time, to really kind of have more of a throwback kind of fun comic book, superhero comic, and so I really enjoyed working on this. The funny thing is, I hated Booster Gold until I started working on this, and he became my favorite. He became my favorite character in.
Okay.
Well, because my introduction to Booster Gold was when he was in the original Justice League, and him and Blue Beetle were sort of the comic relief. And
Yeah.
I enjoyed them in that, but more I enjoyed the fact that they were comic relief. I didn't really look at them as being serious hero characters.
Like when Keith and McGuire were
Yeah.
writing him. Yeah, it was just him, Guy, and Ted were just kind of the wah.
Yeah. But which I was totally fine with that because I thought the book was really entertaining. But I never really looked at Booster as a serious, superhero.
Yeah.
But when I started drawing and got to understand the character, I really, really liked him, and he was my favorite character in this book. And maybe, well, I actually liked Ice too because I got to redesign Ice's
Yes.
costume a little bit, and so
I
liked
like
Ice.
the '80s version. It's that no.
Oh, yeah.
No offense, Aaron, but
No. I know that was a great,
But it was '80s version.
That's right. It was very 80s.
Yeah.
But so
I really liked August General and Iron. I just think he's a super cool character. That whole
Those
thing, the
Chinese
Great 10,
characters are pretty cool.
they need to be used more.
yeah, it was really unfortunate that book got canceled, and it did not get canceled because of sales. It got canceled because of I don't know for sure if it was Jeff Johns, but I think it was Jeff Johns did not like the book, and he thought it was sort of tarnishing the Justice League brand because that was kind of their really hot titles at that time. Was because Jim Lee I think relaunched Justice League right for the New 52, and so they kind of this is kind of treated like the redheaded stepchild, and so they finally got rid of it when they could have. And Dan Jurgens went to Dan DiDio and said, "Hey, look, if you guys don't want this to be a Justice League book, just have them get pushed out of the league and form their own group and call them something different, and we can keep doing the book."
Yeah.
And Dan didn't want to go with that, and so he canceled it. But then I remember later he said to both of us, "Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. Probably should have just had you guys change the name and keep going with it." But because it was a great book, it really was, and it wasn't doing gangbusters, but it was selling well. It was solid.
It was my favorite New 52
Yeah, I mean,
book by a long shot, but I'm a Booster Gold.
Yeah, it was. Well, yeah, it had Booster, so it's a little bit, but it was really good though. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, do we want to segue then and to go in, and we can come back to some questions about the rest of your career, but maybe we could go ahead and touch base on what you've got coming up, your big launch of Wraith of God, which looks fabulous.
Thank you. I'm really super excited about it. It's doing a Western is a bit of a challenge because you're drawing a bunch of stuff that you don't normally draw, anywhere from horses to wagons to the costuming to the old towns and stuff they'll be in. And I do it, especially at this age, I really like to challenge myself and say, you know what? I've done this for 30 years and I've never drawn this. Why haven't I ever drawn this? And so I'm really looking forward to kind of doing the Western thing here. And of course it has monsters in it. So it's, I keep saying I'm not going to do any more monster books. And then every time I do a book, it ends up being a monster book.
I got an idea. Werewolf. Yay.
Yeah. How about that? And so this is essentially, in a nutshell, it's easily described, I think, best as kind of a Batman of the Old West. He doesn't have superpowers, or at least not that we're really sure about. But he's a master of disguise and a master of illusion, and he has a partner that's sort of like his Alfred. She's a former Salvation Army worker that he's sort of coerced into joining him and helping him track down monsters in the Old West. So they have a very tenuous relationship. So that's interesting on the character side, while we've got this other, broader story arc playing out where they're hunting these werewolves across the Midwest, and they're headed towards this small town in Arizona where a monster hunter from Europe has been hiding out for years, and he has in his possession a medallion that if a werewolf gets in its possession, invulnerable. So of course the werewolves want to get the medallion, the Wraith wants to stop them before they get the medallion. So, and then we're not really sure who the werewolf is, and we're not sure. There's some murder and mystery and intrigue, and I don't like to do linear storytelling where I go, we start at A and we finish at Z. I like to start about, well, sort of like I did with the Metamorpho thing. We started in the middle of the story, then we kind of flash back to get caught up, and then we moved forward. And that's kind of how I like to do it, because especially if you have a character with a lengthy origin, which this character does, it's got several layers to it. So to sit there and, just go 20 pages of origin story and then get to the adventure, it just doesn't work. And so we start right in the middle, and not right in the middle, but him messing with these werewolves at the very beginning, and then we start as we go along. There's certain moments in the story that allow us to go back and see where this guy came from and who he is and why he's doing what he's doing, it's very mysterious, and it's a slow reveal on a lot of things as we go through it, and you're not sure of anything really until the very end of the book. So it has a lot of elements that I like. The monster elements, the mystery elements, the sleight of hand, if you will. So there's a lot of fun. It's very fun. And
Aaron, Aaron, tell me about the title of this. So the Wraith of God. Tell me where that comes from.
Well, obviously it's a play on the term Wrath of God.
Sure.
Right. And without giving too much away, because it's all part of this sort of intricate origin story, but he believes himself, much like the Blues Brothers, to be on a mission from God. Okay.
Nice.
So the question is he really, or is he just nuts? Okay. That's sort of the issue. And so I can't really say, I don't really want to say more than that, because I don't want to give away too much of but that's just kind of what and you'll see that from the very beginning. He looks at himself as the wrath of God on earth, and his job is to hunt down these evil beings, which are of course all monsters, right? Because if you're a vampire, you're a werewolf, you're a zombie, you're this satanic evil force that must be dealt with. And so that's kind of his calling, or he believes to be his calling, right? And that's the title. That's why the Wraith
so he's
of God.
he's kind of your specter of your world.
Yeah.
Okay.
In a lot of ways, without the supernatural power.
But of course.
And maybe a tiny bit of Moon Knight influence in there, where maybe he's crazy.
Yeah. I like that too.
Yeah, it looks really cool. So where do you see this going? You have your first issue out. Well, not out yet, but once you get it launched, and are you hoping to do more with this character?
Yes, but I've also got a line of characters that I want to get out. And that's kind of the problem with crowdfunding, is that you're trying to do everything yourself, and you can't do everything at once, right? So you have to sort of figure out, how can I get these characters used, and then not necessarily forget about the ones that people want to see more of, right? So I'm actually, because I've got another character called Kit Carter, which is right behind me there, and that's 50s bubble helmet space girl back there. I have.
Cool.
I've been doing sort of like, they're basically one-page comics, but they're more like Sunday strips would have been, newspaper comics. And you can check out my website, which is aaronlopresti.com, and go to the blog page. And there's a couple of those Kit Carter strips that are up. And I've had a lot of people bugging me for years about, when are you going to do something with Kit Carter? When are you going to do something with Kit Carter? And then when Garbage Man comes out, people are going to want more Garbage Man, and they're going to see the nightclub, and they're going to say, well, when do we get to see more of the nightclub, right?
Right.
And when Wraith of God comes out, hopefully people will really like that and say, man, I can't wait for the vampire story, or whatever would be next for Wraith of God.
Sure.
So I'm not one of these guys that has a character in a single focus, like say Ethan Van Sciver, who's like, yeah, there you go. Who's got Cyber Frog. He's putting everything into Cyber Frog, right?
Right.
Which is probably a smart thing to do. but or Eric Larson, who's going to push, do 200 issues of Savage Dragon or whatever. I've got all these other ideas, and so I might end up doing the next thing I may do after Wraith of God might end up being an anthology of just my own stuff. So you'll get maybe a Kit Carter story, you'll get another Wraith of God story, you'll get a Garbage Man story in there, and that way I can keep all the characters alive, and you don't have to wait 2 years before you get your next fix, right? And if I do, larger format books, like it looks like I'm going to do, it depends again, of course, on how the funding goes and everything like that, and how many pages I can actually do.
Sure.
But if I were to do, say, an 80-page anthology book, suddenly you're looking at 4 characters possibly that would have 20-page stories in it, right? And if they're self-contained stories, which they would be, you wouldn't feel like, oh, this is just 8 pages of this character and I'm not getting a full story. And,
right.
So I'm toying with those ideas. Now, if Wraith of God is like a huge success, right, and just blows up, well, then I'd be stupid not to follow it up with another.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things I'm considering that are sort of up in the air right now, but I do have another Wraith of God story plotted, so I can jump into that. I've got another Garbage Man story plotted and ready to go. So we'll see which way the winds blow, and if somehow I can combine the things into, because I know some people like anthology books, some people don't. I happen to really dig them. If you get,
I love anthology books, so I probably would vote for that idea if I had to pick. But
well, I might try it and see how it works, even because if Wraith of God does really well, which I'm hoping it does, I think it will. But if it does really well, then I can incorporate a short story or a single story in this anthology of Wraith of God, so people can get the Wraith of God fix, and I can still get some of these other characters introduced, and then you can kind of get an idea when you get the reader reaction to, oh, that I really love the Wraith of God story, but I thought Kit Carter sucked or whatever, right? And then you say, okay, well, I'll dump her and go forward with these things. So,
are you good with watching the video real quick for your?
Oh yeah.
Let's get this going.
It's short. Well, I actually just hired somebody to do a really cool video for when the campaign actually goes live. So that was me throwing something together, but
looks
something
great.
with maybe a little bit more guy with a little bit more control of his programming that allows him to do some like cool special effects and stuff.
Well, speaking of going live, when are we looking at launching this?
Hopefully the week of August 16th. I don't know which day. I'm racing to get some more stuff done. I've got the first 3 pages of the story is penciled and inked, and they're off to the colorist right now. Like I said, I've got a guy making a video, and obviously that's going to have to be done. The coloring should be done. I don't know why it wouldn't be. I'm waiting on a 3rd cover. I've got 2 cover options. We showed that one that you just showed, and then of course the Retro 70 Marvels cover is another option. The one we showed, it's not on this, but you brought it up earlier. That one.
There it is. Yep.
And so that'll be another cover option. Then I've got a superstar artist in the industry who I'm not going to name yet is doing a 3rd cover for me. So there'll be 3 cover options for it. And so I got to get something from him. And he seems to, he's assuring me that it's the cover won't be done, but I told him, I said, just get me, if you can get the pencil done so I have something to, promote, then we can do it. So he's he doesn't actually. I gave him till October to get the cover penciled, inked, and colored, but I should have it penciled by time to launch. And so I'm waiting on that, and then I've got a limited edition print that'll be part of one of the campaign perks, or pardon me, the tiers.
That'd be cool.
That I'm finishing right now. I'm inking it right now. Got to get that colored. So if everything goes according to plan, it'll be sometime during that week of August 16th, because I want to get this launched, and we still have a couple weeks of summer left.
Sure. Yeah.
We got a good question in chat that I think a lot of people that follow crowdfunded people like you, why Indiegogo over Kickstarter?
I don't have any political reasons for it, where a lot of people actually do, because I know that some guys have been like kicked off of Kickstarter because of content.
Right.
Political content, not like inappropriate content, just political.
Okay.
Content. And so I know they're best at Kickstarter. Indiegogo takes a little bit less money from you, and they have the in-demand option to store, which I think is brilliant.
That's nice.
Because
it is really good.
Because especially look at someone like Graham Nolan on his Alien Alamo, which is in demand right now. He's collected an extra, $20,000, and probably, I would guess, 300 orders, more in his in-demand store than he did when the campaign was live. So that's a valuable asset to be able to leave that open for, if you're working, like this book will probably, for me to pencil, ink it, get it colored, it probably won't be out till February, right? So that whole period of time, I can have my store open, and then people, no matter how much exposure you get, you're not exposing yourself to that many people, right? And so the course of time, there's always going to be 10, 20 people. I never heard of this. And they go, oh, I want to get that. And so it's there in the store and available for them to get. And the third reason is most of the people I know that are doing independent comics are all doing Indiegogo, right? So it's, so
it's a community thing.
Right. I mean, they can advise me. They know what they're doing. I can be, we can be part of the Indiegogo gang, and so, although if I was doing I don't think they would care, but it seemed logical since they're experienced with that platform and I'm not. So
so
those are the reasons.
Sam has one more question. Okay, what music do you listen to get inspired?
Oh, this is gonna take us down a rabbit hole.
The better question is what does Booster Gold listen to? And that would be country.
I'm a product of my my generation, and so I'm a 70s classic rock guy. So that's, I quit listening to music after about 1989. So I don't really, people talk about Smashing Pumpkins or 9 Inch Nails, and I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about, right? Because I quit listening. So that's what I listen to when I do listen to music, is usually classic rock. I do listen to some pop music from the 70s as well, because I grew up on that as well. I have eclectic tastes when it comes to music, but if I was going to, if I had to put my hat on one genre, it would be classic rock, stuff like Journey and Pink Floyd. And
I think we just became best friends. Pretty sure.
So little REO Speedwagon in there for good measure. The Cars, And
I know Van Halen's in there somewhere. Has to be.
Well, here's the funny thing. I'm not a huge Van Halen fan. And this is what pisses people off.
Oh, we went from best friends to hated enemies.
I don't dislike them, but I like Sammy Hagar's those years with Van Halen more than the David Lee Roth years.
Oh, Aaron. We had such a nice interview going. It was so nice.
It was going really good. I really took some crap for saying that. I don't know where I was at, but they were like, "Are you out of your mind?" And I'm like, "What can I tell you?" That's not to say I don't like. I mean, I like some of the stuff with David Lee. I don't know.
My wife prefers Sammy, and somehow we still are married. I don't know how it happened, but it did.
Well, come on. He was the little red rocker, man. He used to sing for Montrose and back in the 70s. So he's,
Oh yeah.
He's legit.
Now, do you dare ask if he likes Kiss?
Oh no, this could be a
I love Kiss. I have, but I've only
Totally
been to 2
redeemed
concerts in my
yourself.
whole life. One was the Police, and I didn't go. No, wait a minute.
Oh, wow.
One was the Police, and I didn't go because I wanted to. I went because there was this girl there that I was hoping to hook up with. It didn't work out. But I did go to the first Kiss reunion concert back in, what was that, 96 or something?
96.
And
yes.
yeah, and so that was pretty
Oh,
awesome. And we
that
thought
was
they
a
were
great
old then,
show.
you know.
I know.
Yeah,
They're
and I know they're still going, but
they're somehow doing it. I don't know.
are you kidding me? Destroyer's like, one of the great albums of all time. I think the first I got Kiss Alive was the first Kiss album I got. And then
Really?
I think it went Destroyer and then Love
Yep.
Gun and then Kiss Alive 2. So I was just all the way
Rock
up
and Roll
to
Over.
Rock and Roll. What was that album that had Rock and Roll Over? So
Yeah.
those 5 albums, and then I kind of grew out of it. But
well, then they went disco, and then it went.
Yeah. So those were my
all
those
good
were my
choices.
go-tos.
Are you okay now to answer some questions that we have for you that we want to ask about the business part of?
Yeah, sure.
Comics?
I'll tell you what I can tell you.
Well, hey, yeah, we just kind of want to go into, some of your history working for Marvel and DC, and we're not looking for juice. Well, if you can tell us juicy stories if you want, but maybe, how was it? I guess I'm curious. I guess I probably lean more DC over the last few years. I'm a huge Marvel fan too, but I thought while some people don't like Dan DiDio, I think there was a lot of success he had too. That whole era for DC, what was it your time like being there?
It was great. I know guys personally. They're personal friends of mine that hate Dan, and
Really?
I love Dan. I got along great with Dan. He took care of me, so there's no reason why I wouldn't like him. We got along really, really well, and he always had my back. Now he was very straightforward too. If I brought up an idea and said, "Hey, I want to do this," he'd go, "Nah, it's never going to sell. Forget it." And it was end of story. I remember we were sitting in his office one time, and I said, "What is the deal with this trashy Harley Quinn? Why did you do that? Why did you not stick with the classic Harley Quinn?" And he said something like, "Hey," he made a joke. He said, "That's what the kids want," And I said, "Yeah, but it sucks." He goes, "Well, I'm not changing it." So he said something to the fact, "Well, you can hate it as much as you want, but it's not changing anything,"
Right.
I'm not a DC fan in terms of characters. I mean, I know them, but I was a complete Marvel zombie growing up, right? Other than Swamp Thing.
Yeah.
And I occasionally picked up like Neil Adams Batmans, but those were generally in after the fact, like when I was buying back issues, because he was pretty much done by the time I didn't start really reading comics till about 73 or 74. And I was just totally into Marvel. And I think I maybe bought, I like Deadman. I like the Spectre, the huge surprise, right? And Neil Adams Batman. So I would find those books and read that stuff. And then, excuse me. And then as I got into I had a period where I kind of dropped, when I first went to college, I just sort of dropped out of comics. But then about the mid 80s, when I was in film school down in LA, I got back into them real heavy again. And so about the time the Killing Joke came out and things like that. So I got more into Batman and more into DC stuff like Grell's Green Arrow. The Longbow Hunters. It was really cool. And
good one.
Sure.
Tim Truman doing Hawkworld, things like that. Sort of, I started picking that stuff up. But I've always been a Marvel guy. So when I went over to DC, I had no freaking clue about anything. Right. So here I am taking over Wonder Woman, and Gail Simone's writing these characters, and I'm like, I don't even know who these characters are. So I would and I'm really good friends with Terry Dodson, right? So I'd call up Terry, who had just left the book, and I'm like, Terry, who's this Dr. Psycho guy? And he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, you're so, I mean, so I was just like scrambling, trying to figure this stuff out on the fly because I had no Wonder Woman history at all. I had no clue who any of these characters were.
Wow.
And so I was able to kind of fake my way through it. What I got Gail to do was in her first story arc was, if you remember, was the that sort of barbarian story arc, right? Where Beowulf, Claudia, and the Stalker were all in there. And those were all 70s barbarian books that I actually bought when I was a kid because I'm a big sword and sorcery fan too. So I was always, you know, whenever a first issue came out, even as a kid, if it was Marvel or DC, I bought it, right? Because it's a collector's item, right? So, you know, I had the first issue of Beowulf. I had the first issue of Stalker, which was Steve Ditko. And so we used all those characters in that first story arc with Wonder Woman. So I didn't really have to learn anything until we got out of that story arc. We started dealing with the regular, you know, like Etta Candy and all these characters. I had no idea who they were, you know, and so I had to, you know, do research really quickly to find that stuff out and what was going on, you know, on Themyscira, you know, island. What was that like? I mean, I had no idea. I didn't read any of the George Perez stuff. I had no clue. So that was a challenge. And every time I went to a DC character, I had no freaking idea what any of it was about. And I had to go and research.
Do you think that was a blessing? Do you think that was a blessing that you did? I mean, you think that made you better equipped to maybe write and draw for DC?
I think to what writing I did, I think it probably was helpful because I didn't have, I didn't feel like I was slave to continuity other than I wanted to be. Like with the Metamorphose stuff, I knew the origin, but honestly, I had to go back and I have the Brave and the Bold comics. So I went back and read his first appearance to read the origin. And I was like, wow, this sucks. I got to fix this, you know, but other than that, I didn't, you know, I knew Metamorpho from, because I read Justice League International and Justice League in the 80s when, you know, they were more humor books. And like when Bart Sears was drawing Justice League International, I bought that. And as much for the art as anything else. But I did find him fun and entertaining. But that was the only exposure I had to, you know, really have towards Metamorpho other than knowing who the character was from a collecting standpoint. But Bart Sears drew him so cool, he made me want it, you know, to pursue the character a little bit more. And yeah, so that's probably a good point. I did a Batman story, and for originally it was digital, and then it got released in the 100-page Batman Spectacular, I think it was called. And of course, now it's in a trade. It's one of the trade paperbacks. But I wrote and penciled and inked a Batman story, and you know, we knew the Bruce Wayne story. I know who he's supposed to be and basically what his character was, but you know, I wasn't a regular Batman reader, so I just I did my take on what I thought Bruce Wayne was, you know, and I didn't do anything so crazy that I was stepping on anybody's toes or continuity. And you know, it was fine. It was just like a one-off story that Batman experienced, and I kept the character consistent to what I knew, you know, and didn't worry about what was going on in Batman that month. And I was happy to write the story.
You didn't take Golden Age Alan Scott and change everything about him. So, like they have done recently.
I didn't take any heterosexual characters and make them gay. I did not do that.
After 80 years, hey.
Hey, BTW, you changed your sexual preference.
Yeah.
So, hey, were there any characters, I mean, if you were more of a Marvel zombie, but after your years at DC, was there any character like, you know, I got to like them just through having to do research and I wanted to work on those characters, but I didn't get a chance?
Okay, was that DC or Marvel?
DC, yeah, like your years at DC after you got to know the universe a little more.
Superman, which seems kind of odd. Batman, this is really bizarre, but Batman doesn't. As much as I like Batman, everybody likes Batman, right? But
Not really. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm not necessarily okay. Maybe not what they're doing with him right now. Whatever.
No, yeah.
But I mean, just overall as a character, right?
You're right. Yes.
I think you had two revolutions. You had Neil Adams kind of took him out of being dopey into something really cool,
Yeah.
and then Frank Miller did it again in the late '80s. When Batman was starting to become dopey again, he sort of changed him into something really cool again.
Yeah.
And but for some reason, I have never, artistically speaking, have never really got a firm grip on Batman, because to me, it seems like he's never happy. He's always pissed. So you can never like draw a scene where Batman smiles. It doesn't feel right. Even though there are times when he should smile, when you draw it, you're like, that doesn't look right.
Right.
And also Batman he's so cool that I never felt like I drew him cool enough. I draw him and I go, he doesn't really look Dark Knight-ish. He looks a little too just mainstream superhero-ish. I always struggled with that. So, and I never liked Superman coming in because I thought was the most boring character in the world. But after being at DC for 12 years or whatever it's been, and getting to draw Superman not in his own book but in different titles and stuff, I thought, you know what, I really like this character, and I could do something with this character. And so that would be the one. And even though I've drawn him, like I drew him when I did Justice League a year and a half, right before COVID and right during COVID, I was working on Justice League, and I got to draw a lot of Superman in there, and that was a lot of fun. And I actually have a Superman story that I pitched to DC that we never quite got off the ground with it, but that's the one. And I was supposed to take over Superman right after Wonder Woman,
really?
But that's when they were doing that Superman Walks Across America thing, and they told me the script, and I was like, I'm not drawing this.
Oh, I'm glad. Thank you.
I was like,
terrible.
You're going to give me 12 issues of this garbage, and then I'm going to be off Superman, and that's going to be my legacy on Superman? Is that? I said, no way. And so then they gave me, that's when I ended up on Justice League International.
Okay.
So I never got circled back around and got to work on Superman. So that's my regret.
Okay. Well, hey, last question about DC I had.
Oh, and the Creeper.
The Creeper. Oh, I love
all
the
the back hair and stuff. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I love Steve Ditko. So anything he created, I'm kind of a fan of. So, my
favorite characters are the oddball DC characters. The mainstream ones aren't that appealing to me, but I love Plastic Man and the Creeper and Metamorpho and the Spectre.
Yeah.
And so
I love the Question. I don't know if the Question. He's a big one for me. I love that character. Hey, I got a question about Dan. One more about Dan. Is it true that he did hated the legacy characters like Dick Grayson and Wally West? Was that, or is that just like a urban legend?
I don't know that I ever had that conversation with him because I was never involved in that stuff. I know. Here's what I can tell you about Dan. Dan was a very old school comic book soul, much like myself or like Dan Jurgens, and I think that's why we got along so well, is because he's a big fan of the older comics, and he wanted comics that were more traditional in the sense that we had big action, big storylines, superheroes doing big things, and which is what I wanted, and I think most of the readers wanted. And so I don't think he was a big fan of sometimes some of this other stuff that went on that was very dull. And I think a lot of times he went along with big name creators because he wanted the big name creator under the DC tent, but that big name creator wasn't necessarily always doing, I think, what Dan would have liked them to do. So
interesting. You can tell that about Dan, that he liked those characters. And I think I listened to Ethan once, and he had said the same thing, that Dan really liked these B characters, and Ethan doesn't. And I love the B characters. I mean, you can even see that the last thing that he did was, writing Metal Men. And I think Shane Davis, was drawing that. So, obviously he liked those second tier characters, which I agree, I think are outside of Superman, which is my personal favorite. I love those characters.
Yeah, I think Dan was a realist, though, because he was in charge, right? And he had to answer to the money people. And so I think he would have liked to have done more with those characters. But
Right.
he knew not enough people would buy them to justify doing it. But then you're still in that situation where you have to publish those characters to maintain the copyright and trademark, right?
Oh yeah.
So I saw a lot of that stuff end up like what I did. Metamorpho was originally supposed to be its own miniseries, but then got jammed into a oversized anthology where he put Sugar and Spike in there,
Oh, that's
and
right. And Firestorm.
Firestorm, and Metamorpho, and then was there one other in there? Maybe it was just those three.
It was 4. You're right. What was the other one? Was it Metal Men? Was it? Maybe it was. I don't
Might
know.
have been. Yeah, it was Metal. It was, because I did a cover with Metal Men on them. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, and he called it Legends of Tomorrow to kind of tie in with the television show, which really had no tie-in at all.
No, it didn't.
But then the good thing they did was they took those characters' stories out and then they traded them separately as their own thing.
Yeah.
Right. So,
That was
and
good.
we were writing them, those were 20-page stories. So they could have been standalone miniseries, but
Yeah.
I think he looked at the numbers and he looked and said, there's no way. Even, Giffen, Sugar and Spike was really good, but he knew no one was going to buy it.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, how can I get these things published and create the least amount of loss? So I think that's why they had the anthology thing as opposed to their own titles.
Yeah, it's unfortunate you can't get those characters to get bigger, but every once in a while you'll hit. Well, I mean, Jeff Johns coincidentally took Booster Gold and made a pretty solid B character there, a hot seller for a little bit. So every once in a while you can take those lesser tier or lower tier characters and make them pop, but it's hard to do. I know.
Well, sorry. Go ahead, Ref.
No, I think he did the same with the JSA. Like again, got everybody.
JSA.
He fanned the flame of excitement about some of these because I was born in 1985. I'm not ashamed to say such. Same around the time that Booster Gold came out. But so like some of these older characters are being reinvented with the wheel, and Jeff Johns's JSA was something like that. So,
well, I think you're right. You have to be able to do something with these off-track characters that's going to get attention, right? And just doing them like they've always been done is not going to do it. Right. And which with Metamorpho was very interesting because I had a completely different pitch to Dan than what ended up in the book. Because I pitched him, I had Metamorpho. Had been the same basic thing had happened. He'd been captured by Stag and they were experimenting on him. He escaped, but he escaped and became like this hitman for the underworld, right? Because he was, he's basically this monster. He couldn't reintegrate into society the way he was. He kind of became like, Dark Man or something did, if you remember that Sam Raimi movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so he's holed up in this underground lair basically and being used by organized crime and other people to be kind of a leverage guy and just hiring himself out, and then kind of had a moral awakening and changed his stripes. But it was going to be very dark and moody kind of thing. And Dan totally rejected it. Right. And he said, oh, no, this isn't what I want at all. And I said, oh, well, I guess you don't want to do it then. He said, no, I just want you to do a new story. And I said, all right. So then he wanted something big and, interstellar and galactic. And that's what I gave him. And I think that worked out well. It was a good story. I'm real happy with it, but there was not what I would have done with him originally would have really taken him off the beaten path of what you would have expected from a Metamorpho comic. And so that might have given it a chance to get some attention and raise some eyebrows, but
right.
Instead we ended up doing traditional Metamorpho.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, tell us, being a Marvel zombie then, tell us about your time at Marvel. I know you worked on and drew several issues of Miss Marvel. I remember I have most of those issues. So, yeah, there we go.
There you are, her and Power Man. Well, I was I had gone through a stage in my career where I had just when I'm trying to get my Oh, I remember what happened. Okay. So I had just got in the X office, right?
Okay.
And the editor and the assistant editor was Mark Powers was the editor, and Pete Franco was the assistant editor. And I had done, I think, 3 issues for them that we're back in the X-Men black leather outfit days.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And Mark Morales had inked me on a couple of issues, and Danny Mickey had inked me on some of the projects. And so the stuff really looked good, right?
Yeah.
And this is a quote. Pete Franco, the assistant editor, calls me and says, God, we love what you're doing. We're going to make you the next big X-Men artist. Okay. So you hear those words and you think, I am set for life. This is it.
Right. Yeah.
Not 2 or 3 days later, both of them got fired. And I had I went from almost superstardom to unemployed. And so I ended up at CrossGen, and all of us that were at CrossGen, I think, ended up probably doing the best work of our careers. You know, it was one of the most interesting and unique setups. I know this is a long answer to your question, but I had to set it up. So when CrossGen folded, which was inevitable, we were all on our phones, you know, calling up DC and Marvel, you know, going, hey, I'm going to be available in about 2 weeks, you know, and trying to find someone that was interested in what you were doing. And apparently Joe Quesada had seen my Mystic stuff and everybody liked it. So they had kind of extended an olive branch to me and said, well, you know, do you want to do a couple issues of Captain Marvel? And I said, heck yeah. So I did like 3 issues of Captain Marvel, and the series was getting canceled. So they basically just needed those 3 issues done. And so I was working on those while I was at CrossGen, finishing up actually the Mystic had been canceled. I was like doing Lady Death, I think, a couple issues of Lady Death or something.
Oh, wow. Okay. You drew a lot of issues of Mystic, if I remember, correct?
Yeah, I want to say probably 11 or 12 issues of Mystic.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Maybe more. Might have been closer. Well, I worked on her for a year and a half, so probably closer to 20 issues. But anyway, so I did those 3 issues of Captain Marvel, and then they offered me Excalibur, the new Excalibur with Chris Claremont.
Oh,
and I was like, I'm not going to turn that down, right?
Right.
And so it was, you know, it was mildly successful. It wasn't the superhero book that it probably needed to be, and but it would have kept going. But they wanted to reboot the X-Men universe with that House of M, and so that sort of put an end to Excalibur.
That was around that time, yeah. Okay.
Because Excalibur was Professor X and Magneto were on this island with a bunch of new mutants trying to make like a new home world for the mutants, right?
Yeah.
And with the events of House of M, that couldn't work because those guys had to be major players in House of M, and they couldn't be on this island, you know, creating mutant bliss or whatever they're trying to do. So that book got canceled, and then I kind of bounced around a little bit, and I did a Sentinel Squad miniseries for them. I did a couple issues of New X-Men, which at that time was a bunch of teenagers. I think they were, what were they originally called? I can't remember, but and then I did a What If. I mean, it was Marvel was like, well, we don't have a regular book to put you on, so they'd keep finding stuff to give me, which was fine. They were keeping me busy, and I did that Avengers What If, and kind of one of the main stars in that was Ms. Marvel, and so that book turned out really, really well, and I got to draw practically everybody in the Marvel universe, which was a blast. Yeah. And as I was finishing that up, I had been doing some covers for Mark Panisha, who was the editor on the Hulk at the time, and he said, hey, we're doing this thing called Planet Hulk, and Carlo Peglione was the artist. Yeah, there you go. Look at you guys are prepared, man. And Carlo was the artist on Hulk, but he couldn't keep up the schedule, so they said, we want to do alternating story arcs on this thing. And I said, that's fine with me, man. I'd love to work on the Hulk.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did was on this. And then when that was finished, because of the work I had done on Ms. Marvel in this What If Avengers book, they gave me Ms. Marvel. And so I did about, close to 2 years on Ms. Marvel. And then I was supposed to take over Ultimate Fantastic Four, but I said, because I got jobbed out of the covers on Ms. Marvel, right? Greg Horn was doing the covers.
Oh, right.
And I was not, nothing against Greg or anything, but I was like, I was pretty pissy about it because I was drawing the book. I should have been doing the covers, and I was kind of ticked that I wasn't.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, okay, I'll take Ultimate FF, but I said only if I'm the cover artist as well. And they started humming and hawing about that, right? Which then really pissed me off. And so I said, well, I said, let me do a cover sample for you, right? To prove to you guys that I can do this. And I said, all right. So I got about half, it was one of those weird Bugs Bunny moments where I was like right in the middle of doing something really stupid, and it dawned on me what I was doing, I was halfway done. I was like, why am I doing a sample cover? This is insulting. Why did I offer to do this, and why are they making me do it, right? I mean, I wasn't even getting paid for it, right? I was just to prove to them that I could do covers, which I'd been doing most of my career, right? So there's no reason why I should have had to do this. But someone was jerking me around, and I think it was probably Ralph Macchio because that was totally his MO. But I can't say for sure that it was him, but I feel pretty confident it was. And so
fired up in here.
I'm talking about the Marvel days. So
oh, good Lord.
So,
hello.
It's my wife. Those of you guys who watch my regular stream, know that Shelley Showtime is a regular appearance on my. She wanders in at any time, and
gotta please the masses.
That's right.
Yes, hi Shelley. Welcome.
So I finished this. So I went ahead and finished the cover, sent it into them, and they said, "Okay, this is good. You can do the covers." And I said, "I quit," and then I just went over to DC.
Oh, really? Nice. Yeah.
Now, granted, I had the DC thing already set up.
Oh,
I've done that. I'm not that bold. But and the other thing was, I had pitched them a believe it or not, a giant-sized man thing and story, and I wanted to do giant-sized man thing, kind of as a '70s throwback joke. But it was also But it would have been about a 64-page story anyway. It was and so it would have been a perfect little fun thing to do. And they kept saying, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that's fine. We'll do that. And they kept putting it off. And, so I figured this is never going to happen. And then the cover thing ticked me off. So then I just went over to DC, and then that's kind of where I've been ever since. And now I'm in the independent market.
Well, yeah, I guess just segueing into that, and if anyone else has some questions, chime in. But, I heard you talk on a stream kind of how you've ended up in the crowdfunding realm, and it's true of all of you great artists. The regime changed so radically. It seems that both Marvel and DC, there's no one there anyone knows anymore, and they're changing direction so much. It's like, well, okay, I guess we'll go do our own thing. Can you elaborate on that?
That's pretty much the story. I mean, I wish it was more interesting than that, but I was working on Justice League, and my editor at the time that was working on Justice League, he sought me out. He said, "Oh, I was such a huge fan of your Wonder Woman run. When they said we need an artist for this, I immediately thought of you." And I said, "You're full of it." He says, "No, seriously, man, I love your stuff." I said, "Okay." So I'm doing Justice League for him, and then in September, he gets fired. Everybody I know there gets fired practically. Everybody that I worked with got fired. And so I'm sitting there going, what the heck? And so I didn't really kind of know what to do, right? And so I kind of thought, well, I'll let the dust settle a little bit, and I'll send out some emails. And I did, and heard nothing back. And I picked up my dog always has got to bark when I'm live streaming. So I picked up a. Let me close the door. Sorry, guys.
No, you're good.
Right.
Again, if you guys have seen my live stream, you know that happens all the time. So anyway, so I started getting like weird jobs. Like they wanted me to do a Snickers ad, which I wanted desperately to do. I mean, I know how silly that sounds. I remember I was sitting. Ethan was actually we were at dinner at a Seattle show years ago when I was working on Wonder Woman, right?
Yeah.
And Dan DiDio and I were talking about the Hanna-Barbera characters, and he was trying to get the rights to do the Hanna-Barbera characters. And I said, well, if you get the Herculoids, let me know, because I want it.
Yeah.
It's a dream job, right?
Yeah.
So Ethan's sitting there, and he leans over to me and goes, are you out of your mind? You don't leave Wonder Woman to do the Herculoids. And I was like, so, but anyway, so like I said, I have an affinity for these sort of oddball things. And when they called me up and said, hey, do you want to do this Snickers ad? It reminded me of the Hostess Pie ads and stuff that were in the old Marvel books in the 70s.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
It's like, oh, I desperately want to do this. And I did like this 2-page Shazam story. And it is the artwork, the level of artwork I did on it is some of the best stuff I've done. I mean, it sounds silly to say that, but I was so jacked to do it, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, oh my gosh, everybody hacks these out. What are you doing? And I'm like, this is like, I'm doing a Snickers ad. Are you kidding me? And so I did that. And then I followed that up with a popsicle ad with Wonder Woman. And then I never heard anything. And so then you ask yourself, you go, okay, I essentially don't know anybody at DC anymore. I don't know anybody at Marvel anymore. I mean, I know a couple people, but they're in management. They're not editorial, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I've been doing this for 30 years. Am I going to go? There it is.
Yeah, there it is. Very nice.
Norm Rapman inked it, and he stole the pages from me. He still has them and won't give them back. So he's a big Shazam fan. So I haven't been a jerk about it and really pushed it, but I would like to get him back. But I know what a fan he is. I'm kind of letting him have him for a while, and then maybe like a year from now I'll go, okay, Norm, give him back to me. You've had him long enough.
Yeah.
But so you're faced with the reality of, okay, I'm either going to take my portfolio in and grovel before a bunch of 20-somethings who think I'm probably this nice old man, and hope to get something. And half the stuff they're doing, I have profound distaste for right now. We'll just leave it at that. And
Amen.
So am I even going to get something that I could even feel good about working on if I got something?
Yeah.
And then you think, well, okay, let's say I landed something, I could fall between the cracks and get on a book like that was kind of more traditional, and, I would be okay with it and had fun and all that kind of stuff. Let's just say so then when that's done after 6 issues or whatever, then what am I going to do? Right.
Right.
So I felt like, I can still bring it. If I'm going to do anything with my characters, I better do it now.
Yeah.
This is like God telling me, Aaron, here's your window of opportunity. Take it. Yeah. So that's really it.
Well, I mean, it seems to be true for a lot of your peers in a sense, and it's all led you, not everyone, but a large chunk of the top tier talent is kind of, and like you said, whatever's going on at Marvel and DC, and I gotta say it's pretty bad. I mean, I've read comics now for about 40 years, and I've never been less interested in the big two, which, I love independent stuff and I love all these new characters, but, my heart's still with the characters I grew up with as a kid and now we see in live action. And it's pretty disheartening to see the two companies in the shape they're in my opinion.
Yeah. And, even despite content, whether you agree with it or not, there's some real questions on if these companies are even going to be around.
Yeah.
A year or two from now, right? With what these corporate overlords are doing, Yeah. They just continue to cut and cut and cut. So, do we sit there and try and hang on for another year and a half and then the whole thing blows up and then there's all of us scrambling at one time trying to do, create our own books or whatever we can do to survive?
Yeah.
And I just thought, you know what, the crowdfunding thing seems to be sort of peaking right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or moving up. And I think so. Establish yourself now as a reliable crowdfunder, and then when everybody else tries to pile in the market, you'll be someone that people will already be looking to for content, and you'll have hopefully a core audience that will support your product when you put it out there. If you get it out there on a regular basis, and you can keep the quality up, which I have no doubt on either aspect that I'll be able to do. So.
Yeah.
So I figured now's the time to do that before the market even, and the market is getting a little bit, I don't want to say saturated, but there's more and more people coming into it as a viable option. And that's one of the things that we talked about off camera that I'd like to see is us try to figure out a way to bring the price point down so that it gives more people an opportunity to support more titles.
Yeah.
You know, because it's a far cry to say, okay, I want you to spend $25 on my book, or you can go get, you know, Spider-Man or Batman for whatever, I don't know, what do they charge you now? $6, $5?
Well, it's up there. It's up there.
Yeah. So I guess, you know, for the page count that you're getting on the independent books, maybe it isn't that far off, but I would still like to, you know, even if I did I don't know what the price would be on an original graphic novel. If you did, you know, a 64-page or 80-page graphic novel, and it was all brand new material. And the reason they don't do that is because it's not cost effective, right? You make that money on the trades, and they don't have to produce new material to do it. But you probably are looking at a $20, $25 book if DC or Marvel was doing exactly what I'm doing right now. So, you know, but so that's why, again, you know, in the future, I'd like to keep my page count up if I can hit the numbers I need to hit to be able to do that, right? Because it takes X amount of funding to get to a point where you're not doing a 48-page book for $25. You're doing a 72 or 80-page book for $25, which feels a lot better.
Yeah.
But you got to hit those numbers. So
I think you make a great point as an outsider looking into the crowdfunded books. If it was a stock I could buy, I would be buying it right now because I see it starting to take off. I'm worried, and I know you were on Thinking Critical also, and he's a guy that I like, and he reads comics like nobody does. He had a great segment on saying how worried he is he can't suggest comics to very many people right now. He doesn't like any of the Marvel and DC stuff. There's like occasionally 1, 2 maybe that he could suggest, but overall it's just not good writing anymore.
Well, and you're trying to take a traditional market, right? And here's the thing that I don't think they understand, or maybe they understand and they don't care, okay? But the reality is, and this isn't scientific, this is just 30 years of observation, right, from inside the industry. And I'm totally talking superhero comics, okay? I'm not talking about manga or anything else, okay? That's a different animal. But you're just talking about superhero comics or adventure comics, if you will, right? You have an audience that's 95% male, okay? And it's an older male audience, okay? So now instead of like when I was a kid, your audience was 8 to 16, right? Those are 8 to 16-year-olds is who you're targeting. Now you're targeting, you know, anywhere from, your core audience is probably 18 to 36 or something, you know? I mean, it's like this older audience because we're even older.
And I would say it's even older than that.
Yeah, you're probably right. Probably into your 60s, right?
Yeah.
Because guys that bought books in the 70s and they don't like when you try to make all your comics, you know, progressive or woke or whatever the terminology might be. You're creating comics for an audience that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's what they're doing. Exactly. So what do? You alienate your buyers that you know. Now, granted, that market share is not really growing, right? They're growing older, but it's not really expanding. Okay. And so you think, well, if we do something totally different, we'll lose all these guys, but we'll gain all these new readers. But they're not gaining any new readers because
No.
Progressive
Yeah.
woke people, for the most part, don't read comic books, right? And they don't read superhero comic books. If you want to do material like that, then you have to do something you're not going to get. It's like turning Iron Man into a girl, right? No girl is going to pick up Iron Man. They don't care about superheroes.
They don't.
That's a generalization, and there's always exceptions. So I know there's a few women out there that do like superhero comics, and that's fine.
Yes.
But overall, in a general scope, from a marketing strategy standpoint, you're not going to market superhero comics to a female audience. That female audience is going to go and read manga. My daughter's 19. She loves Airbender, right?
Yeah.
The Avatar, right?
Yep.
That's the kind of type of adventure soap opera type book that appeals to a girl. She watches this the Incredible Ladybug, right, which is that animated series. I think it's from France.
Oh, okay.
But it's a manga influence, and they're superheroes, but not in the traditional sense that you would think superheroes. It's geared for teenage girls, and she loves it, right? Because there's a lot of soap opera. It's who's going to get together with who kind of stuff, and it's kind of like the fighting the super villains is like that's secondary, to the dating stuff that's going on,
right?
And so trying to take. They're just destroying the audience that they have built in for these books.
Yeah.
In hopes that there's some audience that doesn't exist that's going to come and start buying them. And we've seen that. When they turned the Iron Man into that little teenage girl, that book got canceled because no one bought it, because no one cares. No one wants.
And yet they're still going to make a Disney Plus show of her, and she has no fan following, but they're going to do it anyway.
Well, they do the same thing with the new Ms. Marvel, that little girl that gets big hands or whatever. It's like nobody likes this character. No one cares about this character.
Well, and I think that's part of the issue is the same people that dislike that type of, or that dislike the traditional superhero stories and stuff like that are the same people that don't like capitalism. Like, I think in the world of comic books, you don't sell it, you ain't gonna be real successful. So,
well, we've all seen Ethan's funny video about, if you don't like my politics, don't buy my book. Well, they're not buying your book. I
mean, you don't. That's the thing that just pisses me off. You don't insult your audience. It's just an incredibly bad business model.
Yeah.
But like you said, to a lot of these people, for some reason, the money doesn't, making money doesn't matter to them. They're like, well, then you're just destroying an industry, and you're going to gain nothing except the destruction of the industry. And so I said all that to kind of I think there's an opportunity here for fans and readers, because there's a lot of stuff coming out in the independent market now that isn't so independent in terms of its content, right?
Right.
When you look at the independent boom in the late 80s, right? For those of you who are alive, maybe none of you were, I don't know.
I'm old.
We were kicking.
You had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Radioactive Black Hamsters, Lone Wolf and Cub, American Flag by
Chaykin.
Grell's Star Slayer, which was kind of a superhero book.
Yeah.
But the most popular book, other than the Turtles, was probably The Rocketeer by Dave Stevens, which was kind of a superhero book, but it really wasn't at all. It was just kind of an old style adventure.
Yeah.
And so they were doing different things than the superhero market. But now you've got so many seasoned professionals going into the independent market and creating the content that you guys used to be buying from Marvel and DC, that Marvel and DC are not doing anymore, other than maybe a few titles here and there.
Yeah.
So you have an opportunity, and it's hard. It's hard to let go of your icons and say, okay, well, I'm just not going to read Spider-Man anymore. I'm not going to read X-Men or whatever. I'm going to read this. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, as a reader, what do you want? What are you going to put up with? Is it worth reading Batman? I shouldn't say, because I haven't read it. I don't know if it's any good or not right now.
Sure.
But just whatever title, right? And say, I'm going to read this, even though I think it sucks, or I don't like it, or I don't like what they're doing, but I'm going to continue to read it because I've always read it.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
I'm going to go over here and say, okay, this is a new character. I don't know anything about him. I can get it on the ground level. And these people are doing comics the way I want comics to be done. So I'm going to get what I want. And it's just going to take a little bit of time to create that familiarity with the character so that you're comfortable with it. Now I'm involved in a new universe. And that's
Well-
always the struggle, you know. It was with
Yeah,
cross.
I think that's the polarity of that used to be there in comics, and I don't think political matters, social matters, and things weren't expelled back in the day. Like I can remember Danny O'Neill's Green Arrow and Green Lantern. Like you had both sides of the story. You had that. Hey, you pick who do you want to be more with Ollie, or do you want to be more with Hal? Like, I mean, what would you? I mean, and that's what made the beauty of it, not necessarily the virtue seal searching as they do now.
And that's just
Go
so
ahead.
you know, that's why we're all so passionate that we've decided this is an area that we want to really go after is the crowdfunded people, just like you. We want to try to get the word out. We want to interview more people like you because we do see what exactly you said. We want those type of comics that is being written and created from you all instead of what we're getting from DC and Marvel right now.
Right. And you know, there's always I saw a lot of this going back on social media just a few years ago. It's kind of been this thing about, I think probably about the time that Ethan launched and Mike Miller launched and, you know, these guys launched this stuff, that first wave. And, you know, about being political or not political. And, you know, the mainstream comic people saying, well, comics have always been political and, you know, and yeah, they have, but like the ref was pointing out, it was, you know, when Denny O'Neil, no one's going to confuse Denny O'Neil or Neil Adams with being conservatives, okay? But they were addressing something that was a real issue of the time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there was race riots that were legitimate. You know, it wasn't made up race that isn't happening other than, you know, in the news media. It was actually, they had problems that they were working through in society and they were presenting those cases, and whether it was environmentalism, whether it was race relations or things like that. And they were presenting them in a realistic fashion, not just some made up, you know, thing that is not really what's happening out there for the most part. And they weren't pushing an agenda. They had their idea of what they thought was right and wrong. And the stories were presented that way, right? And that's all you can ask for, an honest story that says, I think this is right and this is wrong. And they're not changing the characters to make them propagandists. Right. They're putting these characters and who they are in situations that maybe they weren't comfortable with, like Hal Jordan, for example, right? Or you bring in the Black Green Lantern, John Stewart, right? Yeah, he was practically a Black Panther when he got the powers, you know. And so you had these kind of different ideas that were going on, and it wasn't necessarily, oh, John Stewart's right and Hal Jordan's wrong. It was like, this is what he believes, this is how he reacts to the situation, this is how he handles it, and this is how he does. So you can make your own decision. And I think that's totally fine. I don't have a problem with politics being in comics, but they shouldn't be the reason why you're doing the comic.
Yeah.
Right.
And
that's
Aaron,
what's
my
happened
big
because, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ace. No, finish up that.
I was just going to say, I mean,
question.
that's the issue now is that, you know, they say, oh, like you just said, there used to always be politics in comics. Like, well, yeah, there was, but, there's a quote from Stan Lee, and I wish I could remember what he said, but it was, the gist of it was like, hey, you can throw a little bit of politics in there, or a little bit of commentary on what's going on in society today. But at the end of the day, you need to focus it on telling a superhero adventure story. Make it a fun story. Once you lose that as the main focus and it's totally this other thing, you lose the narrative. I mean, it's gone, and the enjoyment of what these characters and product is supposed to be is something else entirely.
Yeah, they simply become propaganda pamphlets, and they're no longer creative storytelling, you know?
Absolutely.
Because I always deal in my stories, I deal with moral issues because those are, to me, are transient. They're always there, right? good versus evil? Am I doing the right thing? You know, am I acting like a hero, or am I acting like a jerk? Am I, you know, these kind of things that you want to see characters go through, because those are kind of the issues we always deal with in life, right?
Yeah.
So it's nice to see those things. They make the characters more real, but when they just become like symbols of propaganda, it just becomes silly, right? You're like, because you can see right through it, you know?
Right.
You go, there's no story here. This is simply you trying to convince me that what you think about this is how I should think, you know? And that's not not a story, you know? And it's not a character.
I got a long question for you, but it's sort of the same kind of thing. Well, as a comic book fan growing up, and I know Ace and Ref are right there with me, I was so excited to see Superman Christopher Reeve. I was so excited to see Incredible Hulk on TV. I was excited about the 1989 Batman. So when the MCU started coming out, I was excited. And I was hoping, you know, comics were thriving right then. And then when the MCU got more successful, it actually started killing the comic books, in my opinion. As a writer and as an artist, were you excited when the MCU really started taking off, or did you see the writing on the wall that it was actually going to hurt the comic book industry?
Well, I mean, as a movie fan, you know, I'm like the rest of you guys. You get to see Captain America on screen, or Thor, or Iron Man, or the Avengers, you know, and that's pretty cool. And but none of us, I mean, look at this. We've had enough experience, like you said, going back to Christopher Reeve's Superman, that there is no, just because the superhero movie is a big hit does not mean that anybody's going to go and buy the comic book. They're two totally separate things. And what you found with the MCU stuff was, I think you can find this with the same thing with San Diego Comic-Con, right? My daughter is a dancer, and so she was in a dance studio, right? So you have all these girls, they're basically teenage girls, right? They all wanted, you know, they all like, oh my gosh, you went to Comic-Con, and but not because there was comic books there. It was because there was movie stars there. It's like, what movie star did you see? And they all wanted to go, but not for the right reasons, right? And they would all go see, my daughter loves Spider-Man. Not because it's Spider-Man, because it's Tom Holland that's playing Spider-Man. You know what I mean?
Right.
So they love the movies for a variety of reasons, but they have nothing to do with the comics, the reasons that they love. So you've got all these people that are movie fans of the MCU or television fans of them, but they're not comic book fans. And it's always been like that. So I don't think anybody expected there to be any sort of, you know, carryover that, oh, these movies are going to help comics, or they're hurt comics. And like you said, they probably hurt them more because now you've got executives in charge saying, oh, now the comics have to be like the movies.
Exactly.
They have to reflect what we're going to do next in the movie. And you're just totally destroying the whole, you know, narrative structure.
For like Marvel and Guardians of the Galaxy, I love the movie. I love that movie, and the characters are pretty close,
Drax,
except for Drax. But you know, so great movie. But then the comics had a recent rebirth with Abnett and Lanning, you know, in the Annihilation Wave, and the Guardians had become what they were, and they were a really great comic. But the movie came out and it hit, and then all of a sudden the comic versions of the characters start to become exactly like the movie screen versions, and they're really not the same character at all.
No. And that's what I always tell people. They say, oh, well, you know, Batman would never do that, or so-and-so. And you're like, hey, this is movie Batman, not comic book Batman, and it's not the same thing. And they're not. So you have to judge them on their own merits. But when you try to cross over, like I said, and I know why they're doing it, with the hope that the people that went and saw the movie are going to go pick up the comic book, but it just doesn't happen. So all you're doing is pissing off the people that were reading the comic and not bringing in new readers to replace them. So you're just killing your audience. And
100%.
Well, and same with other media though too. Like, I mean, I think even Marvel's doing this with their gaming universe. Like, I think DC handled Injustice really well. I think they they handled it and put it in its own universe. Didn't really, and it's been a success for them. But Marvel's just throwing all these gaming universe type titles out there, which are, I mean, I guess it's got, Captain's got a new uniform, Spider-Man's got a new uniform, like, cool, but they're I mean, it's becoming so convoluted. This is the problem with biggest problem with Marvel is it's become so convoluted. You don't know which Peter Parker you're reading, or you don't know which Steve Rogers you're reading, or even like a T'Challa. I mean, you don't know which one you're reading because it's, again, sometimes you'll
There's
get
like
the
500
comic version.
versions. Yeah, 500 versions of Spider-Man. It's almost like, you go back to the original Crisis for DC and they wanted to streamline everything like it was so convoluted. And I'm like, well, whatever was going on in 85 with DC's universe is nothing compared to the multiverse wackadoo that Marvel's doing now with like 500 Spider-Mans and 800 X-Men's. And it's like, who could ever keep that straight?
Well, and and even before that, when you basically traditional old school Marvel died when Tom DeFalco was replaced and Joe Quesada came in.
Yeah.
And then everything
True.
slowly started getting revamped and changed. And then you've got kind of like new Marvel. And the problem is, up to that point where, they were into the 90s, right? At that point before, I don't know when Joe took over exactly, but it was probably like 2000, somewhere in that neighborhood, 20
I feel
years
like it
ago.
was, yeah, around 2000, yeah.
And what you had was everybody knew who the X-Men were. I mean, at least in the comic book world, right? Everybody knew Spider-Man. You could say, well, I haven't read Spider-Man in 15 years, but if I go pick him up, it's still Peter Parker. Maybe he's a little bit older now, and maybe some of his relationships have changed. But you could get caught up, Now, with this kind of rotating creators all the time and rotating visions from editorial, which is now being completely controlled and directed by corporate money pressure and has nothing to do with editorial content anymore, that how many times has Spider-Man been revamped in the last 20 years? How many times has Daredevil been changed and altered in the last 20 years? How many times has Batman been rebooted in the last 20 years? And I think it's worse with Marvel characters than it is, because DC has seemed to Batman still seems to be pretty much Batman, and Superman, pretty much Superman. But you're right. I don't have any idea which Spider-Man is what. And so how can you, if you're an old reader and you want to come back to comics, you really can't.
Mm-mm.
Because you can't figure out what's going on, and it's like,
no clue. Yeah.
If you're a new reader starting right now, you jump on this train, but then a new editorial team comes in, or a new editor-in-chief, and they kill that Spider-Man and bring the clone back, and you're like, what? So there was that sort of uninterrupted continuity for 60 years.
Yeah.
And then suddenly now it's just kind of been a free-for-all, and there seems to be no direction anymore, and it's constantly being revamped, and because everybody's chasing dollars or their political agenda or whatever's driving them, but nothing's being driven by what's the best editorial content for this line of books to make it successful over the long haul, if it can even be done. Because we are in a new era right now where we're competing with video games and streaming services and everything else.
That changes things too.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have those options when I was a kid. It was comic books, Mad Magazine, and movies. That was it. So we didn't have
Saturday night main event.
Yeah, exactly. Wrestling, so
I had He-Man and G.I. Joe too, so
there you
go. Aaron, my big question, and I know we're probably getting a little shorter on time, but my big question for you is, Ace and I and Coach and Spirit are going to go to a Comic-Con here soon. COVID really sucked the joy out of that. We've been multiple times, Chicago, Kansas City. Yes. So, are you going to be at any cons here soon? I think that would be something that people would be interested in, and we're going to Kansas City in a couple weeks. So
was just there for like this Fountain City mini con, like
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
2 weeks ago, week and a half ago.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I'm going. My problem is I'm just becoming kind of a grumpy old guy, and it's like I don't like to travel. It has nothing to do with COVID. It has absolutely nothing to do with COVID.
Yeah.
I remember probably 15, maybe, 15, 20 years ago, I'd run into like Walter Simonson at a show, right?
Mhm.
I'd say, oh, yeah, you should come out to this show or that show. And he's like, I don't really like to travel anymore. And I'm like, what? Come on, it's fun. You stay in a hotel, you get to eat food out and all this kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
remember Kevin Nolan telling me the same thing. I don't really like traveling anymore. And now I'm that guy. I'm like, I don't want to travel anymore. I get in a plane, I got to switch planes. I don't
The hassle. The hotel room might stink.
Right. But I am doing a store signing in Tennessee at Golden Age Comics in a week and a half,
Mhm.
Okay.
and then I'm doing the Rose City Comic Con, which is in Portland, so it's just I just drive there, and then I've got an invitation to a show in New Mexico, which I'm seriously thinking about going because I've never been to New Mexico, so why the heck not? And then somebody on a show in Houston is just talking to me about a November show in Houston, so it's going to be more about. Do I really want to travel or do I not want to travel? More than that, and I want to do Heroes Con next year because I was set to do that in 2020, and then of course COVID shut everything down and didn't get to do it because I haven't been there in a long time. But I'm a comic collector, and so I like to go to shows not just to go to appear and sign autographs and make money, but I like to go there and spend money. So I miss comic shows not only as a professional but as a fan, and so that will probably keep me going to them, even if I don't necessarily want to. My interest in traveling gets less and less as I get older.
Well, but hey, you get the opportunity to come talk to some dorks like us, and I think this is your artist alley, and we're coming up here and talking to our friend Aaron and getting photos.
If you're an independent contractor, which I clearly am now, it's like you got to get out there and push your product. So there's a great value to, seeing people face to face at cons. So, yeah, I mean, I go to ones I'm invited to, and they've told us that San Diego is going to go forward next year. So I still have my with Terry Dodson, which we've had for 20 some years. So unless they cancel it again, I'll be going to that. And but then that's a West Coast flight. That's like 2 hours. Like going to a New York show right now is like there's no way you're getting me on a plane for 6 hours.
I can't blame you.
So plus I don't want to get mugged since New York has been taken over by
pretty much.
It's like the Omega Man over there now.
It is Omega Man. Yeah. It's Mad Max Road Warrior.
Exactly. So I mean, you won't be seeing me there anytime soon, but yeah, I'll do shows, but you can get me about like Kansas City. That's about. Then I'm starting like I really don't want to go any farther.
So, I get that.
Don't go east of the Mississippi. Just stay.
Stay there.
Yep. So we'll see, but I'm not avoiding cons or anything. It's just I'll do as many as I can muster up the willpower to do.
I agree.
I can't blame you. Well, hey, I think you guys have any more questions? I think we could probably wrap up. Aaron, we've really enjoyed talking with you tonight. This has been a lot of fun, at least for me.
No, it's been fun. I enjoy doing this. I appreciate you guys inviting me on, giving me a chance to talk about my experiences and push my my project.
Well, we can't wait. I mean, honestly, we can't wait. Garbage Man is right up our alley. Wraith of God looks amazing just on the artwork so far that you've gotten done. So best of luck to you 100%. And we all do appreciate everything that you came in and took your time to talk with us about this.
Well, thanks, guys. I really appreciate you having me, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Aaron.
Heck yeah.
Can't wait. You take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thanks,
All
guys.
right. I think it's time to end the broadcast, but that was great. We are out.
Peace.